Today we're going to be looking at how to clean a semi-automatic shotgun. We've already looked at how to clean an over and under, so we're going to look at the nuances of how to clean a semi-auto. First, you need a gas semi-auto. Inertia guns really don't need to be cleaned that often, so a gas one's a good place to start. Preferably a dirty one, because re-cleaning clean guns is something to do for the insane. So first to do is to strip it down. Every gun will be slightly different, but for the most part, front nut off, fore end off, barrel off, piston off, charging handle out, bolt, follower, carrier out, and then finally, because we are going to give this gun a fairly in-depth but not totally in-depth clean, get a drift and a hammer, and most trig units will be held in by a little pin like this. Make sure you're doing this in a nice clean environment, but somewhere that you don't mind getting dirty as well. Mostly because a lot of guns have little springs, and a lot of guns, if they've not been looked after over the years, he says, so here it is, the very, very dirty trig unit. The action, you can take the stock off too, but there's fairly little point to that. And all your other junk. So, where to start? Probably with the barrel, because that's the easiest part of the lot. Before you do anything, pop your choke out with an appropriate choke key. Out it pops. This one has had adequate lubrication, so it came out nice and easy. Sometimes they can be a real pain. So in that instance, take the bead out, dip it in some diesel, take it out and try again. If that really doesn't work, a blowtorch, something to heat it up and really help unseize the threads. But for the most part, as long as you keep your gun really slick, certainly in this choke department, you'll be absolutely fine. So, how to clean the barrel? It's not quite the same as a standard shotgun barrel, and only really because on these gas guns you have two ports in here, which you need gas to flow out of to push this piston back, cha-chunk, to make your gun work. So this is a real area of concern. So, let's get some gear. It's at this point I should say that this video is brought to you by ProShop and KG, who sent us down all of these cleaning products to have a go with. And to be honest, my first impressions, I've cleaned a few rifles and my own gun a few times with them, is they are really good. I'm usually a low faff guy, but actually having all of the own little bits that do their own little job is really handy. From these little toothbrushes, as opposed to using mine, to the degreaser that's actually pretty good. And it contains no ammonia. Not entirely sure what that means, but I'm sure it'll still sting your eyes if you get it in it. So please use adequate protection, gloves, eyes, the works when using such vicious stuff. I must admit, one of my favourite products is this. It reminds me of Panda Pops as a kid. Don't drink it though, because it's got all these bad things, bad signs at the bottom, so don't do that. However, what we are going to do is run a patch through this gun. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this, we're going to get ourselves the spiky one. So it comes with an eyelet when you buy this rod, but the spiky one is significantly cooler. It comes with all the pre-cut patches, which can feel a little wasteful, but as you're going to see, we're going to use these a lot. So first things first, stick them on your spike. I found the spike doesn't really penetrate these that well, but it does hold onto them well enough. What we're going to do is just load those patches up with Panda Pop. It's going to go on the patch here, maybe a little bit more. And I know it's probably a little bit wasteful, but you can afford to use a little bit of this because it's not overly expensive. And like we did with the over and under, is just chuck the gun clean out of the barrels. These bores are actually pretty clean already, so we're not going to stress too much. He says as the thing goes out. When I say pretty clean already, there's no leading, no lead fouling, no plastic fouling on them. They are just powder dirty, which should clean out pretty well. You can take that off, and I'll chuck a phosphor bronze brush on it, come back in a sec, and scrub it out. Right, so just run the wire brush through it quickly. I'm going to dig out a phosphor bronze wherever I've done with that. Phosphor bronze on, and we're just going to give it a quick scrub. As well as focusing just after the forcing cones there where it gets a bit dirty, with one of these, it's always worth just running the brush through a little bit up here on the ports. Right, phosphor bronze done. We're just going to put the patch back on and just push it through once more. We're going to come back in a minute and put the mop through it. But because we're about to work on the port, I don't want all the dirty oil from that coming. I'm filling up the barrel after I've already done a decent clean. All right, that barrel is looking lovely. Double-ended nylon brush. A little fine end, big fat end. You've got curves in it. It's just a nice thing. It is actually better than a toothbrush, and to be fair, about the same price. So, for this, and I'm sure people chastise me at this point, it is nice to put a little bit into the lid, just so you've got a bit to work with. This is where this wobbly bench really isn't ideal. Just dip that in, and you're just going to work around inside the back of the action here, on the barrels here. You've got the part where the extractor goes in. You got that. Actually, I should have used the fine bit for that. Up in the corners there, nice and simple. All of the little notches, just make sure you get all this grit, fouling, old powder, dirt. I mean, to be fair, we go as far as seeing like grass in guns, old grass, feathers, all sorts. Because some guns are used very, very hard. So at that point you can now use the patch just to run it around in these bits. Actually just flossing out some of the holes. And actually, at this point, using that little thin punch you had before, you can really get into those areas. Continue to just inspect around the gun up this end. And now we're going to move down onto this, the gas port. So first things first is just to wipe it over and see what is removed. Quite simply, as you can see, all this dirt here is removed just with that degreaser rag. Try and avoid using the spray solvents and degreasers where possible. They're just a bit wasteful, and to be fair, that degreaser is pretty potent. This KG one's about one of the best of the lot, but yeah, in case of contact with the eyes, flush with cold water immediately and contact a doctor. Swallow, do not induce vomiting, and contact a physician immediately. Keep out of reach of children. All the other ones, when you actually look at the cost sheets for these, they're pretty evil bits. So, I don't know if you can see down in here. You'll be able to see when I scrape it out in a second. Have a look at the front of that. This is not the appropriate tool, but how much carbon is in the bottom there. And this is where most of the carbon will end up. So actually, there will come a point where actually chiseling this is necessary. But for now, we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to get in there with, not using any force, you're not going to scrape or hurt this in any way. It's just slowly peeling away a lot of the carbon, which you're about to see in a second when I pull it out. Ready, steady. I think that people neglect is actually to get rid of this build-up. The older it gets, the harder it gets. And a lot of people, when you don't even have oil in your guns, this has had some oil and you can tell because that paste is still a bit greasy. And that's actually significantly better. That will jam the gun up a little bit if you leave it wet and don't clean it, than having that as solid hard carbon, which I have had in the past to get a proper chisel out and actually slowly just tap it away to get rid of it. Feel like a bloody stonemason. Down in there are two little ports. You can see actually there's a lot of carbon here, even where you can see in the places where it's less vital. Doing this blind for the camera is not ideal. As I said, you end up with these two little points inside here. Just make sure you push something fairly small and spiky in them, just to make sure they're good. As you can see, quite a lot of grime in there that a lot of people would neglect. Just quickly, what I'm going to do is load this patch up again with sauce. To be fair, you can probably do a little bit more than that. It is like even the consistency, a thick, sugary cherryade consistency. This is definitely one to keep out of the reach of kids and me if I was thirsty for cherryade panda pops. And just really work your way around the outside there. You can see you pick up an awful lot of junk, but this is what it takes. So doing this every time, by the way, from the start, will save you a lot of this work in the long run. And we're just going to put a clean patch inside there just to soak that out. And away you go. And the final thing we will do with this is put some of that solvent degreaser through, because that, with this little applicator pipe, will get in there and blow those gas ports out good and proper. Apart from that, I mean, look at it, it's still got a long way to go. Still got a long way to go. You'll see at that point that actually the amount of stuff that you've pushed through the ports and into the barrel, generally from the barrel down, you'll see it's absolutely full of grime. You'll probably not be able to pick up on the camera, but it is rancid. So I'm just going to take that patch, put it on here, and just push it through quickly. As you can see, plenty of carbony crud. Right, I'm going to pop the top off of here. I always like, and I know it's probably stupid, to keep this pointed way away from me. I've had it go off from my eyes before. It's not fun. Eye protection is recommended, but for the most part you really can just put this down into the pipes there. And actually this pipe is good enough that it can go all the way through those little gas ports. Make sure you're really pushing anything out. And the final thing to do is put a brand new patch on. In fact, I'm going to even go to the wool mop at this stage because I'm that confident those barrels are clean enough. Put your wool mop on. As I say, you're really not looking to use this wool mop for anything other than a final polish. So I've used that on 3 guns, and as you can see, it's pretty clean. Now I'm about to break that rule really, by not putting a patch through here, but there we go. Barrel's clean. We're just going to finish up by cleaning the choke. He says, there it is. And for that again, I'm just going to get the cleaning brush, dip it in the cherry aid, just work my way around those threads. Wipe it over with a patch. Job done. Before I put this back in, I'm just going to chuck a little dab of grease on there. So I'm just going to chuck a little bit of grease on there. They actually make a proper choke tube lube that goes on there. It's a little bit thicker than this grease, which is actually, to be honest, a little bit better. However, as long as you put some lubricant on that choke of a greasy variety, you're good to go. You know, oil can burn and dry off. This moly grease won't, and will just remain in there, in the threads, keeping it slick. And providing you take it out regularly, you don't need to use that super thick grease. So for most people, I'd recommend that you use the super thick greasing, as most people never change their chokes. And that is the barrel done. It is as simple as that. If it's really bad, they do a load of proper solvents, but for the most part, you won't need to use them. And we're going to work on the bolt, which in this instance is absolutely disgusting, which is where these toothbrushes come in really, really handy. Using a little bit of this to wash it off or to clean off the bulk, just loo roll, white roll, blue roll, any roll you've got, kitchen roll, will save you a lot of time and effort. You're not looking for particular cleaning, you're just looking to remove the bulk of the junk, which, to be honest, is quite a bit. I think in this instance, I'm actually going to strip this bolt down properly because it is rank. You know what you can do instead of that though, which can come in handy a lot of the time, is if you just have a little white spirit bath and just dip it in, shake about in white spirit or diesel, and that will soak off the majority of the crap and actually save you a lot of effort for intermittent cleaning. No substitute for a proper clean, hey, you can't have everything. You can, of course, spray it in this, but not wanting to be wasteful, you actually require quite a lot of this stuff to do a good job. And white spirit's reusable. And being an eco-conscious guy and not wanting to contribute too much to the downfall of the climate of the world, you know, reusing stuff's great, and white spirit's a great reuser. This, amazing for getting stuff out of places you can't get to, or it will do the job. You know, cleaning products are one of those things that we all like to buy, mostly because it's therapeutic and they're not that expensive, and buying new guns every week is expensive. Buying new gun oil is just a good reason to go to the gun store, / gun stop shop / the gun shop. There we go. Right, should I take this apart? Yeah, I'm just going to take this apart. It's rank. Most semi-automatics come apart relatively easily anyway. So actually, it's not going to require that much energy and effort to take those extra little bits apart so you can get in and give it a proper clean. And it's at this point that I'm going to bring in the toothbrush. And actually, once you remove the bulk of the rubbish, this is going to make light work of the rest. And then, again, just a quite quick wipe over with some paper, just to remove that dirty oil. And this is, again, we're having a little spirits bath is never a bad thing. Job done. In the traditional gun world, it wouldn't even be white spirits. You'd boil it in a magical solution of soda and light lemon juice and that kind of stuff, which is pretty effective, to be fair. But I don't think many of us would get away with doing that in our domestic kitchens. Or would want to be fair. Just a reason to get yourself a little gas hob in the man cave if you're really that anal. But a gun's got to be in pretty sorry state to give it a deep boil clean like that. All nooks and crannies cleaned, it's time to throw this bad boy back together. Again, every gun will be slightly different, but for the most part, they're all quite similar. So I'll take that, take that. And in. He says, semi-automatics go together really easy, he says, as the gun decides not to want to play ball. There we go. And the pin just goes back in the top. Again, every gun will be different, but it takes nothing just to go back together semi-correctly. Done. There's another good reason to keep your guns clean all the time, because actually I forgot how tedious it is to have to give a gun a proper deep clean because of neglect. And I say that as someone who neglects my guns often. It takes nothing just to take them out and just give them a quick spray out. Even if you just own this. And as much as I say it's not ideal, tell you what, for convenience cleaning, that mixed with a bore snake, it can hide a lot of sins. Done. Next, similar thing goes for this. Wipe off all the rubbish. In fact, similar thing goes for most of this gun. Clean off all the junk, give it a clean, give it a polish, wire wool, plenty of this degreaser, and if you're real doubt, use a bit of solvent. But you can really, as I said, get away without using much solvents whatsoever. Plus, remember, if you're using solvents, use them in a well-ventilated area, because, can I tell a story, an accident that once happened to me? I once was working on an air gun, and it went off. No one, the customer had not told us it was loaded or there was a pellet stoke or anything like that. All we did was pick it up, the safety was on, everything was good. I put it on the workbench and the thing just goes PCP, bang, straight into a tin of 009. And yeah, I mean, we generally check things are clear by looking in the breech. This is a safety lesson for you all as well. Muzzle awareness is really key, especially working with dodgy air guns. People do have a real disrespect thing for air guns a lot of the time, but I wouldn't want to be shot with it. But they shot this can of 009 and the cloud of 009 filled my old workshop. And ever since, I got out of there pretty quick. I don't think it was that bad. My lungs have been pretty damaged from that incident, depressingly. And I say pretty damaged to the point that I can handle most things, but 009, even the smell of 009, like, sets me off on an asthma attack. Sad story, but also a real key thing. Aerosols generally are not as good as bottles, because just leaking everywhere would have been bad when you inject it into the air. And that's probably why I've got an aversion to them. And secondly, gun safety. And thirdly, well-ventilated areas with solvents. Really very wise, because, yeah, I know we just take it for granted that you can go and buy them, but they really are, can be pretty potent things. There you go. Sob story done. Gun part clean. So, action. Grab a bit of white roll and we'll just see what we're dealing with. We have got a little bit of carbon build up here. This is where actually, someone will say something when I get this. We're just using a little flat edge or a front edge screwdriver, just scraping off the top. Not damaging the metal, literally just gliding it over the top like that. Can save you a whole world of time and hurt. But removing the bulk and working smart, not hard. You can spend hours there scrubbing that. A little bit of wire wool goes a long way, and certainly we're dealing with any of this gas work as well. But again, luckily this gun has had a decent amount of oil and lubrication, which makes this whole job significantly more pleasant. Amazing how hard some of this carbon can be. Right, front done. Similar treatment for the inside of the action there. You'll see certainly on the inside of this one that it is filled with crud. If you don't believe me, watch this. Just one little bit there. Actually not as bad as it looked. Most of that was completely superficial. Usually you can whack out inches of crud when working on these sort of guns. Even this gun is what, probably 25 years old, something like that. Not doing too badly. If you really want, again, any excuse to give it a squirt, mostly because it's just pretty in the light behind me. You can guess who used to go to rave parties as a kid. And now we're down to the last two components. The trigger group and the piston. The piston is just a long old slog. Get one of these, or a phosphor bronze version that they do, and just sit here, going around, piece by piece, as you can see, removing that carbon, which it does really nicely, and then wiping it off to reveal the shiny metal underneath. And you'd be amazed how quickly they do. Certainly if you're using all the cartridges with no powder burn in harsh conditions and leaving it in a buggy. You'll remember on Year of the Gamekeeper when we saw Dave's gun. It's not hard to get them to look really bad. Right, outside done, and now onto the inside. Now this actually is where I'm going to go and leave to go downstairs, because actually what I'm going to need to do is use a slight curved piece of metal, because if I just do this quickly, you see how much junk I just got from inside there. I'm going to need to use something a little bit aggressive. I shall be back momentarily. So either a scraper, and to be honest, actually at this point what I'm going to do before I do that is get a little bit of a cleaner soaked rag and just probably throw the cleaner in like that. Just work it around, just let it sit. But if you look how good that cleaner is, it's actually flaking it off. That's really very impressive. And it can flake off thick carbon like that. So leave it to sit like that. Actually, to be fair, this is so bad, I'm going to bring out the big guns. Here's the big guns KG carbon remover. It's very keen that it contains no ammonia. The answer here, I think with a lot of these things, is to be quite liberal, and actually once it's in there, just roll it around. All right, let it sit and eat. Whilst we do that, I'm going to talk about the trigger group. It's certainly a time that I should have put on. Nitrile gloves are a really good idea, by the way, guys. I generally don't wear them, which is not a good thing. Whew, that's a powerful solvent. Not in a bad way. You know when it hits you. So here we have the trigger group. What we're going to do, have a look at this. Oh, it's satisfying. Wiping away absolute rubbish. It's therapeutic sometimes, gun cleaning. It's just better when it's not your own, maybe. Right, at this point you can use a lot of this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go downstairs and I've got a little dippy pot of white spirit. I'm just going to put it in there and give it a shake, and that's going to lift off all of the rubbish and make your life a lot easier. And for the sake of a bottle of white spirit, just keeping it safe, it's a handy thing to do, especially when cleaning trigger groups and really complex stuff. So I'll be back in just a sec. So I find when you put it in the white spirit, it just lifts all of the stuff out, and I find sometimes if you're trying to wash it out like this, you can actually blow stuff in. I've seen people do it with an airline, and actually if you've got unburnt powder and stuff, you can create yourself some serious problems there. So best to lift everything off and give it a little blowout with this. The beauty of that is it will clean out with the white spirit, then flash off and leave us just ready to have not some of this, but some fine applicator lubricant, which what we'll go through right at the end when we're putting it all back together. And that leads us on to this that's had a little soak. At this point, get some wire wool or a patch, and you're going to clean that out, and that's actually going to work. Wow, that's really quite something. Sometimes when wire wool's not enough, use the phosphor bronze. You can just run up and down the side just a bit. In all honesty, I generally stick it on a lathe, and I've got a special tool that goes up when it gets to a certain stage that you do just need to chisel it off. Yeah, it's a lot of elbow grease required, so I'm going to go off, elbow grease this, and it's going to be ready to go back in. There you have it, one clean piston. And now it's time to put it back together. But before I can do that, what we need, really, is actually I have it already over here, is to lubricate everything back up. And one of these fine applicators is great, because what you don't want is to over oil them. So really what you want to do is just drop little bits here and there on your sears, in your spring heads. Keeping grease away from these, apart from in the choke, is always wise. Grease is great as a long-term lubricant, but actually you don't really want to be having long-term lubricant. Even one of these certainly can act as a bit of a grinding paste when you use it as a semi-auto, because they seem to attract so much dirt and rust. I know a lot of the boys at the clay ground won't really experience that, but it is real. And straight down the spring, boom. One little notch on the back, one on the front, and away we go. And so at this point, I'm going to throw her all back together. Piston, keep dry. All gaswork, keep dry-ish. Wipe it with an oily rag, but that's literally, you don't want it dripping. Dripping is going to attract carbon. Attracting carbon is going to create paste. Paste will dry if you don't clean it. So, there you go. Don't be a muppet. The end. And I'm going to throw this back together. Da, 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 da. As you will see, we take things very seriously, like using the appropriate tool for the appropriate job. Happy days. Ensure you relocate your rat tail just nice, and away you go. The only thing I didn't clean is the charging handle. That's a little wipe over before we put it back in. They generally don't get too dirty, which is lucky. 1, 2. And there we have it. One clean gun and one immensely dirty work surface. Providing actually that you act a little bit cleaner than I have, all you have to do, pull that off. And the reason that I line it with paper, generally not this much, but I thought the contrast would help, is wrap it up into a bundle, and there we're done with it. Guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something. If you've got any questions about your own semi-auto, chuck them in the comment section below and we'll try and help you out. But for the most part, stick with what you're comfortable with, have fun, keep your guns clean, and they'll look after you. Take care. We'll see you next time.